After the release of New Vegas and a successful collaboration alongside Bethesda, Obsidian began development on an intriguing sci-fi RPG that would never see the light of day. This is the development and demise of Backspace. At some point in late 2010, work began at Obsidian on a title known as Backspace. The exact timeline of its development is undocumented, but it seems to have coincided with the production of Dungeon Siege 3 and New Vegas' DLCs, ending somewhere around April of 2011. The project was led by Jason Fader, tech producer on New Vegas and later project director on the still upcoming System Shock remake. It would have featured time traveling, planet hopping, alien invasions, and fast-paced combat in a sci-fi setting. The plan was to pitch it to Bethesda and to use the Skyrim engine to power it, similar to New Vegas being built off of Fallout 3. Of course, a significant amount of work would have been required to create new models for just about everything, considering how little of Skyrim would work in a sci-fi world. On the other hand, many members of Obsidian's team were already familiar with Bethesda's engine after spending nearly 2 years utilizing it for New Vegas. During a 2013 Kotaku interview, Obsidian CEO Fergus Urquhart released several pieces of concept art and several snippets from the design documents. Quote, "Backspace is a single-player action RPG set in a sci-fi space environment with simple elements of time travel. The combat is paced similarly to Skyrim, but slightly faster since there is no concept of blocking. The easiest way to look at it is a mix of Mass Effect, Borderlands, and System Shock 2 for gameplay and setting." Unquote. Unlike New Vegas, it wouldn't have been an open world game, and instead it would have seen the player travel from one planet to another, similar to the Outer Worlds. It also would have featured a massive space station. As the design document reads, "This station is huge. It can be compared in size to the Citadel of Mass Effect or Babylon 5. The station has several locations devoted to diverse research fields, which would allow us to have vegetation overgrowth, high-tech disasters, and mutations of science as visual themes. During character creation, you could choose from several backgrounds that would affect how NPCs reacted to you, including the mad scientist, the lone wolf, and the arrogant savant. You would have played as a cyborg, mostly human, part machine, who worked at a research lab that would have been attacked by aliens. A subsequent malfunction at the lab would transport you 10 years into the future, and you'd find yourself in a dystopian, alien-controlled universe. Quest would play out with the protagonist traveling back and forth through the timelines to save humanity, reminiscent of Chrono Trigger. It seems the leveling system would have been very similar to New Vegas, featuring stats, skills, and perks. The next section of the design document states, "In the distant future, mankind has colonized the far reaches of the galaxy. Near the center of the galaxy is an enormous space station dedicated to advanced research in a multitude of subjects, such as temporal mechanics and nano-cybernetics. The game begins with the station falling under attack from an invading alien force. As the player completes quests, solves puzzles, and eliminates enemies, they gain experience points towards their next level, similar to Skyrim. When they gain a level, they are awarded stat points and ability points that they may use to increase their stats and abilities respectively. Every other level, they can add a perk, just like F3/FNV. The following section provides some information on how combat would have played out. It would have featured high-tech, long-range weapons like machine guns, shotguns, semi-automatic rifles, sniper rifles, and rocket launchers. For melee combat, it would have included katanas, mauls, battle axes, chainsaws, and something called a temporal lance. It also had deployable weapons, everything from frag mines to turrets that attacked and slowed down your foes, and even decoy robots that drew enemy fire. This section states, "Combat in Backspace occurs very similar to Skyrim. The player can attack enemies using various ranged or melee weapons/abilities that they acquire/create throughout the game. The player can also utilize stealth tactics to avoid enemies entirely. Since Skyrim allows for dual wielding of weapons/abilities, all one-handed weapons may be dual wielded. The controller's left trigger uses the weapon/ability in the left hand, and the right trigger uses the weapon/ability in the right hand. If a two-handed weapon is equipped, both hands are in use. Pressing the right trigger will use the weapon/ability standard attack, and pressing the left trigger will use its special/secondary attack. Two-handed weapons and abilities are much stronger than one-handed weapons. Unlike Skyrim/FNV, stealth in Backspace is 100% active and undetectable unless something disrupts it. The player is completely cloaked, a la Stealth Boy when they enter stealth. Doing this will slowly consume energy, but the player is completely invisible until they deactivate their cloak. This means that they can engage/avoid some enemies while still being completely invisible. It then describes an ability called Personal Cloak. Cloak is an active ability that the player must toggle. While active, the ability slowly consumes the player's energy. The player can use other abilities while cloaked and will remain invisible as long as they have energy. Some enemies can detect the player's cloak if they have infrared detection. It then mentions a deployable item called the Cloak Emitter. An alternative to using a personal cloak is deploying a Cloak Emitter. Cloak Emitters can be constructed and consume no energy from the player. If the player is within the Cloak Emitter's radius, the player is completely invisible. The emitter itself is not invisible and is vulnerable to enemy attacks. The player can retrieve the emitter after it's been deployed to use again if it has not been destroyed by enemies. Backspace had an interesting take on how companions would have functioned. As the design document states, since only the player can travel through time, companions in Backspace take the form of AIs that the player can equip in their AI slot. An equipped AI can engage in dialogue with the player and provide a bonus to the player depending on the AI, like an increase in damage or energy regeneration. AIs can be found throughout the game and have a variety of personalities. Once the player acquires an AI, they will always be visible on the UI and represented by their emoticon. When an AI talks to the player, their emoticon can change based on their feelings on what they're discussing. The final section covers a ubiquitous technology that would have appeared throughout the game. Scarabs are small robots that have become the multi-tool of the future. Scarabs are deployed to handle a variety of tasks throughout the station, like building complex structures and repairing vital systems. The Scarabs operate semi-autonomously once they have been given a command, but most of the time they are controlled by a Scarab Queen in a hive-like fashion. Each district on the station has its own queen to help balance the workload, and at the core of the station is a super queen to coordinate the district queens. Scarab queens are not self-aware, have minimal AI, and completely obey their masters. Scarabs are also deployed on planets that the planet gates are located on. Before a planet is colonized, a large batch of scarabs is deployed to scavenge and refine resources that are used to construct a basic base for humans. A queen is deployed with the scarabs to coordinate this effort. During a Reddit Ask Me Anything thread, project director Jason Fader stated, "I was working closely with Bethesda on Backspace. Since there were no other projects lined up after the Old World Blues team finished their work, I took it upon myself to try to find another project for the company. I reached out to Bethesda and directly asked them what type of game they'd be most interested in publishing next. From there, I started working on a pitch based on a prior game I made, Thread Space Hyperbole, story only, not gameplay. The gameplay was something designed around Bethesda's interest at the time. No other publishers were pitched on it to my knowledge, but there was interest from a third party in creating a TV show based on it. I actually started working on the project a bit before that by myself after hours, probably as early as October 2010. It was an after-school project for a very long time. And after a few months, more and more folks would join me after hours to volunteer their time to help. I don't think we actually worked on it by day until the final month for the prototype. Then the layoffs happened. Then I stuck around for a few more years. Then the big layoffs, including me this time. Then I volunteered my time to help Obsidian close up some projects with the promise that I would get the rest of the rights to Backspace. That never happened. Lesson: always get promises in writing. I really wanted to explore that world a bit more, and maybe write a book based on it. That never happened. Everyone has moved on and recovered since then. Sometimes I get messages from the old team asking about bringing the project back in some form, but honestly, I've moved on and don't plan on looking back. It's easy to take away from this quote that Jason Fader was fucked over by Obsidian, but I suspect the reality of the situation is more complex legally. Even though it was Jason's passion project, it's likely that the work of many other developers went into crafting the world. Writers, concept artists, designers, etc. Even if they had given him the rights, it's unlikely that an indie project with a small team would have produced a game with the same scale or quality that was originally intended. During an interview, Fergus Urquhart revealed the status of the project. Backspace was a project concept that we neither canceled nor greenlit. We had some great people work on the idea for Backspace for a bit of time, and then move them off to other projects as opportunities came up. We've been around for 10 years now, and have a bunch of great ideas that we still have sitting around that we may be able to return to in the future. All of New Vegas's key developers were still at Obsidian when Backspace was being worked on, and they might have recaptured that magic once again if given another crack at Bethesda's engine. Perhaps even more importantly, it might have helped avoid the series of layoffs that later affected much of the team. Considering it's been over a decade since its conception, it seems that this fascinating IP will remain nothing more than vaporware. Backspace could have been an intriguing sci-fi Skyrim-based RPG, but ultimately, all of it was left on the cutting room floor.